Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Youth and Women Platform. And this is your host, Sister Zinat. The purpose of the program is we talk about the problems of youth and women, and we even discuss the solution with an expert in the studio. So today in the studio we have a special guest from USA. She have done a bachelor's in accounting, and then she even did master's in Islamic sciences, that is in philosophy. Sister Maryam Muaddal. Assalamu alaikum, sister. How are you?
Walaikum assalam. Alhamdulillah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much, and thank you so much for being a part of this show.
Thank you for having me. Alhamdulillah.
Sister, we have been talking about a very interesting topic last time, that is influences. So we would continue with that.
Yeah, inshallah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي صدق الله العلي العظيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء ورحمة الله وبركاته. So we're talking about influencers, and we're discussing about the hijabi influencers, and unfortunately we have this trend that's happening today where some of them are taking off their hijab, and we're discussing how it's important to do amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar, that it's wajib, that is incumbent upon us to forbid from evil and to enjoin the good. And so it's important when some of these influencers are doing this and we're following them, that we let them know that this is hurting you, this is hurting your soul, and that we actually care about them. We don't have to come from a negative standpoint. We come from as a positive way, and we tell them that we actually care about them and we want what's best for them, for this dunya and the akhirah, this world and the next. And so that we should let them know, message them, private message them. And if that doesn't work, then it's important to take this amr bil ma'ruf, this enjoining the good, forbidding from evil, nahy anil munkar, to a next level, because there's different layers.
Wow.
And so one other thing we can do is, if they still don't listen, that we unfollow them. We don't have to follow them.
Yeah.
We unfollow them because they did something, they've committed a sin. When anyone commits a sin, we need to let them know that's not okay, especially if it's public. Now, sometimes someone commits a sin in private. You don't find out about it, that's fine.
But this is open.
But this is open, and not only that, they also are influencing other people. Now, when someone's an influencer, their deeds, their acts, what that they share in public affect public. They're an influencer. That's what they're called, right? They're a role model, essentially. And so, in that, it's encouraging. They're encouraging that, because when you're a role model for other people, people will look up to you.
Yeah.
And if you're committing a sin, people will look up to that.
Yeah.
And so they will also get the sin. If other people will follow in their lead, they will also get the sin for that. So not only will they get the sin for doing that sin, but if other people do it because of them, they will also get their sin.
That's very true. They have to understand.
And so, like
that.
in the story of Habil and Qabil, Habil and Qabil, the two sons of Adam, one killed the other, right? And it's interesting because in the story of Habil and Qabil, he was the first man to kill another person. He was the first murderer of history.
Yeah.
And ever since then, whoever kills another person, he also gets the sin.
Yes.
Because he was the first person to commit the sin, and he became an influencer for others.
And he was like promoter of jealousy, who was jealous of his own brother.
Yeah.
He was the first person to be jealous of.
The first person, Shaitan would be, I would say, the first creature to be
was
jealous.
That was a jinn, right?
He was
not
a jinn.
human being.
Yeah, but he basically did that. So he's sharik in that
He's
sin.
He's
part of that sin of other people. When people murder, God forbid, someone else, or someone kills another person, he's part of that sin as well. So it's really important that when you have that effect in other people's lives, that you have to really be careful what you do in public.
Yes.
It's the same thing with the Prophet's family. The Prophet's family was looked up at to. They would influence other people. People would look up to them because they were the Prophet's family. And so their deeds had a higher, if they did something good, it had a higher value because other people would learn from them and to try to do it. And if they committed a sin, God forbid, then people would also learn from them. So it's in the Quran too, that the Prophet's wives have a higher responsibility. And so it's really important to realize that when you have that role, if you're an influencer, you have that responsibility. And it's a responsibility because it's a blessing from Allah to be able to be an influencer, to be able to influence someone else.
It's like popular. You're popular right now.
Yeah,
I think it even goes with the speakers. Speakers,
exactly.
like it goes
We want to
with
get into that as well.
scholars, or I know,
Definitely.
they're just going, or maybe even like Zakir, what you said, just a speaker who's not from a seminary, who does not have the complete knowledge, but whatever two books they read, they just, and that does become influences. They even look upon their husbands or their wife or their kids, you know.
Yeah, it does happen.
So you just make sure at least you have knowledge before you're speaking, you know.
Yeah, that's definitely a topic we need to discuss.
Yeah, we
as well.
would in future. So
no, actually, we will inshallah get to that. So it's really important to do that and to keep that all these points in mind. There's a trend as well that I've noticed is that there's articles coming out about these people, and not just about these influencers. Also, like sometimes I've seen Muslims will make clips or they'll make a video or they'll make something, and there will be some inappropriate elements in it. There could be haram music, or there's not proper hijab, or there's things that in there that is just controversial, and maybe in our fiqh perspective it could be wrong as well. So there's things that people do in those videos that are not necessarily correct, and so people will mention these things in an article to blast them out. And so what I want to say is that, as again, Amr Ma'ruf and Nahy Anil Munkar is wajib, and so it's important to speak against these things and say, okay, this is not okay, this is not in line with our sharia, that we need to stop doing this. But at the same time, it's important not to bring names. Now, why is that? If you look into our religion, if you look into the way of the Ahlul Bayt, the way of the Quran, the way of our Prophet, they barely mention names. Mm-hmm. Even our own Prophet, his name, guess how many times his name is in the Quran? 3.
Wow.
Right? So there's not that many names in the Quran. There's not. Even if we do have a few names, there's specific reasons for that. It's rare that Allah will mention a name in the Quran. And it's the same thing with the Prophet. For Imam Ali, they barely would mention a name. And when they're talking about something, they won't mention that specific person's name. Now, why is that?
Yes.
One of the reasons it could be, one of the wisdoms behind is that when you mention a person's name, essentially you're giving them more attention. You're giving them negative attention, but still attention.
You're giving them attention.
And so essentially what happens is, in a sense, it becomes a sense of advertisement for them. And so it's an advertisement. It's a negative advertisement, but then at the same time, people will still learn about them. And it's funny because sometimes there are phenomena that I didn't even know about, or these videos I didn't know about, but through these articles I learned about. And sometimes through these articles they actually become more popularized than they would have gotten if there was not like these articles against them. So I think it's really important that if we're going to like let them know, if we're going to publicly talk about this, and these are conversations we need to have, don't bring names.
Yeah.
It's better in terms of the akhlaqi sense. It's not haram, but it's better in the akhlaqi sense just to not to bring it up. And in general, and you see that the maraja and the ulama, they do this. They practice this specific thing. And so hopefully that can help to bring the right change that we need to do in our communities and in terms of within the Muslims. Now, since you mentioned the issue of speakers and Islamic speakers, this is really important, and you think this is because this issue of Muslim speakers, it has a huge caliber. Now, it's important that, okay, if you're going to listen to someone, I think it's important if some of these Muslim speakers are scholars who studied in the Hawza, and some of them are seminary, and some of them are. No, between someone who's studying in the Hawza and someone who hasn't, which one makes more sense to listen to?
I would always listen to someone, a scholar who studied from the seminary, Islamic seminary, and got that knowledge from a bigger grand scholar, rather than listening to someone who just read 2 books and had the desire of sitting on the pulpit and reciting. Personally, my personal experience since my childhood, that I have been listening to lady speakers, I have heard so many wrong messages, so many wrong traditions of Holy Prophet, and so many wrong things about it, that I have personally, after learning Islam, I said, I'm not going to listen to that person unless and until I'm going to ask the person, have you studied from the seminary? Because I have been getting misguided, wrong information so much myself. I was like, I don't want to listen to anyone but a scholar.
Yeah. It makes more sense to listen to someone who actually studied a topic, like when they're actually spent some chunk of their life
Because they're
studying
experts, yeah.
they spent a lot of time and energy learning about Islam, and it's important to understand like Hawza in itself. Once a person enters a seminary and goes to Hawza, they're not, when you first arrive in the first set of years, you're not necessarily studying Islam. You're more focusing on the tools to learn about Islam.
Yes.
That's what Hawza does. So it gives you Islamic, not
A
Islamic,
foundation.
a foundation.
Yeah.
So for example, Arabic grammar, sarf and nahw,
Yes.
aqayat, beliefs, mantiq, logic,
Logic. Fiqh.
usul, fiqh, all
Islamic
these
laws.
things, these are foundational.
Yeah.
Philosophy, falsafa, all these things are foundational things. And if you don't know these things and you're going into the books of hadith, you won't necessarily understand them
Yeah.
correctly. And I've seen this myself because like I spent a lot of time before coming to the Hawza studying about Islam. I spent hours and hours just studying on my own. And now that I've been through the seminary, my understanding has completely changed. And it's
Yes.
because you don't have that foundation if you don't go to Hawza. So it's really important. And so as you were saying, sometimes I've seen speakers who haven't been to the Hawza and they'll say not necessarily correct things sometimes.
No,
And I don't
yeah.
mean, and a lot of times they don't mean to.
They
say-
don't mean to be wrong.
They don't mean to be wrong,
Yeah,
but
but
they misunderstand things.
misunderstand, yeah.
Unfortunately, that happens, and I've seen it too. And when I've been going through my Hawza classes, and I realized, oh wow, that person said this, and that was wrong. Like my teacher just said this.
Exactly.
And so I see it within what I'm studying in the seminar. I was just like, oh. And even in those Hawza, as you grow, you go through the different levels, your understanding keeps
In a
getting
different way.
gets higher and higher. You
Yeah.
get better teachers as you grow along. So it makes a difference if the person studied like 2 years versus 3 years versus 4 years. And it's important to understand like just because someone says they study in the Hawza, that doesn't necessarily mean it's true. There are people out there who lie about it. Okay,
Yeah.
it's important to. I've seen people who studied here for 3 years and they haven't even passed their SARF class.
Yeah, this
Okay.
is like 3 years is very basic foundation.
No,
Yeah.
3 years, but they didn't pass their sarf and nahw
Didn't
class.
even-
That's the grammar. That's like the first classes you take
Yeah,
after like
yeah.
learning Farsi and all that.
Basic.
That's your basic class, and they didn't pass that. They didn't get even farther, but they were like, "Oh, we've been here for 3 years."
3 years.
Yeah, and it's like, so just because someone says I've been here for 5 years, 10 years, whatever, make sure they've actually passed their classes and they've been through the system, because sometimes people don't even pass. And I constantly say that people will get stuck in the beginning classes, because usually with Arabic grammar, it's a little bit more tricky. You have to actually work at
Yes.
it to get good. And so a lot of times people won't even pass that. But then they use that cover up, oh, I was in Qom, or I was in the Hawza.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, now I can do tabligh or what. So it's like important, first of all, making sure that that
Start,
person.
oh, you're from the whole seminary. Come and speak. Sit on the pulpit.
So it's important to actually confirm, like with people who've lived in Qom or who are around that person, or with the Hawza, that okay, this person actually graduated, did this many years, did this many studies, like making sure that person is actually studied.
Yeah.
That's one thing important, and actually properly studied.
Graduated, yeah.
And it also too is that they're also fully practicing. I've also seen people who come to the Hawza but they don't pray. Like they
Wow.
don't like
They come to the seminary,
they
but
come
they
to
don't
the
pray.
seminary.
Yeah.
They even have the intention to do tabligh,
Of speaking out.
Speaking.
Yeah.
but they don't pray.
But they don't pray.
They are,
okay.
and I've seen it firsthand. I've seen this within. Unfortunately, there is this trend, and sometimes people just come here because they want to become, I don't know, whatever reason they have, but they're not even following their basic
The basic
the
things,
basic fiqh, the basic
foundation.
things that Allah tells us to do. And so it's really important to. That's why it's important to do research before. Like if you're inviting a speaker to your community, make sure confirm that this person's A, knowledgeable, B, actually is practicing, C, their akhlaq is good, because
The nature is good.
the
yeah.
nature is good, the akhlaq is good. They're as in like sometimes people, I've seen people also who have studied here for several years, but then they've been kicked out from the Hawza because they're ethical, the way their behavior was,
Discipline,
they just didn't have discipline. And they were kicked out from Hawza. And yet they're doing tabligh back in those, they're wearing the amama, they're wearing the whole garb,
Uh-huh.
yet they've been kicked out of the Hawza because they weren't acting in the right way.
were not
under it.
disciplined,
They weren't
yeah.
disciplined, they did unethical things. And so like if you have someone like that doing tabligh in your community, they can do more harm than good. And sometimes I've seen with these type of people, they are rude to people. They're really rude and they offend people. And it's unfortunate.
Yeah, maybe they are just making money, or maybe there is some other reason behind that. We never know. But I would even like to come to a point that there are people who do not go to seminary at all, who just pick up like 2 books of, they learn something about masahibs. You know, something that makes you cry. People like about Bibi Sakina and all those traditions that which they eat masahib at the end of the majlis when you read Maddahi. So that's the one. They were wrong traditions that was expressed. I have heard about Bibi Fatima Zahra, Bibi
Yeah.
Sakina, Salamullah Alaiha, totally wrong. And when I went to that person asking them, have you studied from any hawza? The person said, no. Seminary, the person
Well,
said,
Matahin usually
no.
they don't study
No,
at
no,
the
not
house.
Maddah. He just gave an example of the last tradition. Everyone have their own different ways, right? And then where did you get this from? I got it from Google. The person is a speaker, and the person is saying, okay, then the point comes, like my open thought, that to express freedom of expressions. Why did you appoint that person to sit on the pulpit, you know, giving a lecture for so many majlis for you, you know, for this entire thing? Because the person is giving knowledge, and there are people who are believing in that knowledge. And on the day of judgment, you will be responsible that you did not investigate before pointing her to speak from the pulpit, because what she's speaking is totally wrong. So the answer that I got was like, we don't care. All we care is like the more she makes people cry, the more we are happy. We just want audiences. And this is the very bitter truth of the centers, because I have been dealing with a lot of centers and all. When I go out and talk to
Yeah.
the sponsors and all, they say we want the people who shout or make people cry or something. But they don't understand, if the person doesn't have any knowledge, the person is not from the seminary, I mean, not even 6 months. You're just exploiting the pulpit.
Yeah.
This is a very bad issue going on, and the person is speaking is wrong.
Yeah, unfortunately we have that. I mean, Shahid Mutahari, may Allah bless his soul, like he has a full book about this, where people would make up stories about the Ahlul Bayt on the day of Ashura just to make people cry, and you're lying about the story, and it's not okay. Like, just because the means don't justify the ends. Just because you want people to cry doesn't mean that you can do anything you want. You can't make up
Distorted hadith on the day of Ashura, right?
Yeah.
Of Ashura. I've read that book.
Hamaseh Hosseini, that's the
Yes,
part.
and it
That's
was so interesting. So many people.
And he's so angry. Like, when you read that book,
He's
he's
upset.
so angry. He's so upset. He's like, what is this? Like, why are they doing this? And you can tell, you can sense the passion that he had, and the way he was so upset. And it's not okay. It's definitely not okay.
When I was at the seminary and I was studying this book, I was given to do a essay on this book, read, and the teacher said you have to do it. When I was reading this book, I was so surprised. Since my childhood, I have been listening to so many hadiths that I believed to be true that came out to be totally false. Oh my gosh. And I was like, look how many wrong things this zakir, this speaker, who do not go to the house, the audiences, who are actually listening to us, they should be very much alert on that and understand this point that if you want to, even in your house of 50 people, if you want to invite any speaker, please at least ask how many years of education you have done, who was your teacher, in which seminary. And I know every houses during Muharram and Safar, if there are so many houses, 1,000 houses has 2,000 houses. At the same time, maybe they have a majlis going on of Imam Hussain, the martyrdom, people explaining. So they are not going to get 1,000 speakers to speak. That's why they say we don't have, okay, that person can speak about at least, I don't know what, making the people cry, what you say as Masahib. But if you really want to talk about Islam, appoint a scholar or at least someone who has studied from the Hawza.
I mean, it's fine. Like, in these, I know in small towns, like sometimes there's just no scholar. There's no one there who studied Hawza. Like, we don't have, unfortunately, it's a huge issue right now, is that we don't have enough mubaligh. Now, at least with men, well, with men it's a little bit better. With women, it's almost, we barely have any.
We barely have any.
And it's unfortunate, it's a problem. Like, we don't have enough women in the seminary. Especially not from the West. And unfortunately, most of the families that do come here, the wife is not studying. And unfortunately, from what I've seen is that the men don't understand there's a need for it.
Yes, there is.
While I remember there was this one scholar, he was if I mention his name, everyone will know who he is. And he came to our school and he said that, or Jose, and he said that the same way we need nurses, women nurses, we need women scholars. And he said that. And I remember before coming to Jose, I would ask brothers, brothers who studied in the Hawza, like, is it wajib kifai? Like, is it wajib
it
for women
mandatory, yeah.
mandatory for women to come if they have the ability to? And they would say no. But then I came here, and then they're like, no, it's necessary. It's wajib.
It's mandatory.
It's
you're saying,
mandatory.
because of lack of women scholars in this society.
It's important. Like, it's unfortunate that when we have, but sisters have to go to brothers when they have a problem. Like, even me right now, most of my teachers are men. There's not that many teachers that are females, even within the seminary itself from Iran. There's not that many female teachers.
I would have to cut you over here.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being with us. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back after a short break. So, sister, we have been talking about the speakers, how they have to be knowledgeable before they sit on the pulpit, and how we need a lady speaker. So we encourage many lady speakers to come to the seminary, study Islam, go out in the society, and speak out. Because not everyone is a speaker. Most of the people who graduate, very few are speaker. Because speaking is a skill. Not everyone can speak out.
You mean scholars?
Yeah, no, anyone. There are thousands of scholars that are graduating out. Not everyone is a speaker. It's an art. It's something that has been given to that person by God.
It's an art. They have to practice.
Definitely, it is. So we need more lady speakers, and we were even talking about that.
Lady scholars.
Not only lady scholars. Whoever is sitting and doing the majlis of Imam Hussain, please at least ask them how many years of education you took from the seminary. What have you been studying? Who's your teacher? Please just don't let any popular person who's just making you cry or yelling out make themselves on the pulpit and call them a scholar. I would like to say one thing. I'm very sorry to say, but when I was in India, what do you mean by akhund? It's a Farsi word. What do you mean by akhund?
In Farsi, it just means someone who wears the
it means a scholar, right?
Not necessarily. Sometimes when they say akhund, it has typically a negative connotation. So it just means someone with the cloak.
With the cloak who's giving speeches, right?
Typically.
Yeah, someone.
But it has a negative connotation here, usually.
Anyway, so someone who's giving a speech, not even from the Hawza, is giving the title of akhund, that is a scholar, So that was so surprising. And I asked the question, why do you call that lady a scholar? I've studied few years in the seminary. I'm not a scholar. I don't even call myself as akhund, right? And that lady is speaking just by reading two books. You calling the person.
You guys call them akhund because
here
it's only men.
I don't.
They usually only call men akhund.
Yeah, but the ladies also sometimes in India, the Iranians who reside call a lady speaker as akhund, but that person have never studied from the seminary and getting the big title. So it is surprising the people, they don't understand. When you try to give them knowledge, you cannot call the person as akhund because the person is not from the seminary. Akhund has a different meaning. You can call the person a speaker, a zakir, a zakira, something like that. But not, I don't understand. So we were talking more about the speaking,
Just to add to that, this whole issue of like women studying in the Hawza, it's a huge need. It is really, it's a need. And this is a problem when you go back home, when you go to America or Europe or Canada, most women have to go to talk to the brothers who studied in the Hawza when they have an issue. And a lot of times they don't understand issues that females have.
Yes, they don't.
And it's a problem. And it's not just even back home, even here within the Hawza. Within the Hawzas, we don't have enough female teachers. You don't have access. There's just not enough women who've studied at a higher level. Usually if women do study, they usually start for 3-4 years and that's it.
Yeah.
A few years, they don't get to the higher levels and we don't have women who've studied as many years as the men have.
Yeah.
And so obviously
But the woman is supporting that man.
They're supporting it. But at the same time, we also need females. Females need teachers as well. And it's obviously better for a female to be able to have access to a female teacher. And it's just more comfortable you can ask anything you want, but when it's a man, it's like, okay, when you want to discuss certain things, it becomes very, very difficult. I mean, back home, there's issues of rape, there's issues of postpartum depression, there's issues of...
Back home in USA, right?
In America, yeah, in
Western
the
countries,
West, the Western
yeah.
countries, we have all these issues, and a lot of times men don't understand them, or they're not familiar with them because they're not a female. They don't understand it. So it's obviously, if we have female scholars or female who study them, the Hausa who are actually knowledgeable in the field, it's much preferable. It's better for the fitra, it's better for the ruh as well, that women have to deal with women, men have to deal with men. It's better. The same way we want women to be able to have female doctors to go to, it's the same thing. We want also females to be able to go to a female scholar and ask their questions. And because you go to a female scholar, there's no room for shaitan to enter, right? But if you go to a male scholar, shaitan is still going to try to trick us, right? And like, unfortunately, we have cases of bad things happening when things like that happen. And shaitan will try to deceive everyone, right? It's not, there's no full, even if you have been to seminary, does not mean that you won't make us commit a sin. And so that's really important to consider.
Because you're not sinless.
You're not ma'soom, right? Yeah. And so it's important. That's why when I was talking about when you're trying to invite people to speak, it's important to research them, see if have they studied, are they pious, their akhlaq, do they have an akhlaq teacher, are they going to a specific teacher, at least one teacher that's guiding them, that will tell them, okay, you're ready to do tabligh. Because if you don't have that, then who's going to be telling you, okay, like you're screwing up here. You need a mentor. And it's the same thing even back home. We need mentors. We need people from the Hausa coming and mentoring other people. And we need the older generation mentoring the younger generation to go toward the right path, right? And so it's important we have that system, but unfortunately, we also need to make sure we have the right people to be mentors and to be teachers and to be scholars and to be guiding the community.
Oh yes, definitely. We don't need so many people. So what exactly, last time we were talking about the influences, that we get influence from the YouTube and Facebook and everywhere. So who should we look upon as a role model, really, in this 21st century we're talking about, right?
I mean, we can find people, there are people out there who, if they are practicing properly, if they are, they're believers, and within each community you'll find believers who, their akhlaq is good, they are pious, they're practicing. You'll find these type of people within any community. You'll kind of find a few, at least one or two. Even there are people in the Hausa, right? They're scholars, the seminary, who do practice properly. But then always remember, though, they can always screw up as well. Like, they're not foolproof. And that's why it's important that when it comes down to role models, we actually look into the Quran.
Yes.
And then we look into the role models that the Quran gives us and take them as our role models, and especially our Prophet, Fatima al-Zahra,
the
Imam
ladies'
Ali.
role model,
Yeah, the ladies that we have, and even the men. Like, it doesn't, just because Fatima al-Zahra is a lady doesn't mean she's not a role model for the men. And just because Imam Ali is a man does not mean he's not a role model for women. It goes both ways, because at the end of the day, they're human. We can still learn from them, right? The ruh in itself, the spirit, our ruh, is genderless. The deep layer, at least, and there's different ideas on this, but like at least the deep layer within the ruh, the highest layer, the aql, that's genderless for sure. We know that. And so the intellect there's no gender to that, so we can learn from them.
So for the youth, I think they should read the history of the Holy Prophet, the way he lived his life, the life history of Bibi Fatima Zahra, salamullah alayha, the life history of all the Ahl al-Bayt, especially I would say the life history of Sister Imam Ali Raza alayhi salam, was the 8th Imam, that's Bibi Masuma salamullah alayha. How beautifully she lived her life. It was not just the support she was giving to her blood brother, she was giving support to the Imam of the time, like the way Bibi Zainab salamullah alayha gave support to Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So it's very important, because we keep thinking, oh, we are from 21st century, we don't need all these things, they were from old generation, they didn't have to work, we have to work, we have this. We don't realize the moment we start studying all these things, especially the life of these ladies, the bravery, the way they used to speak, when they used to speak, and how they used to speak, the way they lived their life, actually comes as a big inspiration for this 21st century. Because if the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, have told us, guided us, if he says that take Bibi Fatima Zahra Salamullah alaiha as a role model, you know, that means there is a reason. Until the day of judgment, they are a role model for the women of all the century, especially for youth. Okay, if you're not taking them as a role model, then who's a role model? Some actor, some model, someone YouTube inspirer, influencer who has a story to give us, but we have to think about who is the bigger role model for us.
Yeah, I mean, the ultimate role models are the role models that the Quran gives us, the Ahlul Bayt have given us, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, and then as well as just all the prophets and the role models that the Quran gives us, Maryam alayhi salam, Hawa alayhi salam, all those other ladies as well, the ladies of the paradise.
The ladies of the paradise, yes, because if you look at the life of Bibi Maryam Salamullah alayha, all their life have been so tough, but still the way they took it with chastity was very beautiful. So of course we have to read the Holy Quran and understand the meaning, because every time when we read the Holy Quran's meaning, we understand Quran in a different way. Second, we have to understand Ahlul Bayt. It's just not the month of Muharram that we are going and crying for Imam Hussain coming back, going to ziyarat, that's it. This is what we think. Do we know the life of Ahlul Bayt? Do we know the way they live their life? It's not about crying, it's about understanding them in a right way. So definitely a role model in the best way can be the ladies, the best ladies of the heaven, which the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, has spoken about. And today we have been talking about influencers, how they influence a life from YouTube, from Facebook, especially the youth. Be careful, because you have been talking about so many things, the pros and cons and how it can advantages and disadvantages and give a solution. So that was a very good example, especially for the youth. If they take this as an example, it would be great. So thank you so much, Sister Maryam, for being a part of this program.
Well, thank you for having me.
So thank you so much, everyone, for being part of this program. Stay tuned for another exciting topic. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.